Some of the most famous faces in Hollywood now look completely different from the ones the world fell in love with. Movie stars, supermodels, and TV legends who once ruled red carpets slowly changed in ways fans never expected. Cosmetic experiments, risky procedures, and desperate attempts to stay young turned familiar faces into shocking transformations. From a legendary supermodel whose fat-freezing treatment made the fat grow instead of shrink, to a Hollywood star whose perfect body surgery left permanent damage, these are 20 celebrities who aged so badly they're almost unrecognizable today. Number 20. Courtney Cox. Courtney Cox became a household name as Monica on Friends and later stayed in the spotlight with the Scream movies. For years, she had one of the most recognizable faces on television. Her look was sharp but natural. She had dark hair, strong cheekbones, clear eyes, a firm jawline, and a face that looked clean, balanced, and expressive. She did not need flashy features to stand out. Her beauty came from how strong and real her face looked every time she smiled, frowned, or reacted on screen. Then she started trying to fight aging. Courtney later admitted that fillers slowly pulled her away from her natural look. She said it became a domino effect, with one doctor suggesting one thing, then another suggestion after that, until her face no longer looked right. She later said the fillers made her look really strange, and she eventually had them dissolved. During that filler-heavy phase, her cheeks looked too full, her skin looked too smooth, and the natural balance of her face started to disappear. Instead of that crisp, familiar look people knew from Friends, her face began to look puffier, tighter, and less like her. The movement that once made her face feel so real seemed buried under too much volume. Number 19. Melanie Griffith. Melanie Griffith was one of Hollywood's biggest blonde stars in the 1980s and 90s. Movies like Working Girl helped make her a familiar face, and back then she had the kind of beauty people noticed right away. Her face looked soft and alive. She had bright eyes, warm cheeks, natural lips, and that easy smile that made her look both glamorous and approachable. Nothing about her looked stiff or overdone. Her beauty felt effortless, which made her stand out even more on screen. Then, that face began to change. Melanie later admitted she went too far with cosmetic work and said she did not realize how different she looked until people started reacting. She said another doctor eventually began dissolving what had been put in her face because she wanted to look more normal again. In later appearances, her skin often looked much tighter, especially around the cheeks and mouth. Her cheeks looked fuller and heavier, her lips looked thicker, and her expressions seemed less free than before. The soft blonde movie star face that once looked fresh and relaxed started to look strained, puffy, and overworked. Number 18. Mickey Rourke. Mickey Rourke was once one of the most fascinating leading men in Hollywood. In the 1980s, movies like 9½ Weeks, Rumblefish, and Angel Heart made him famous for a face that looked rough and handsome at the same time. He had heavy-lidded eyes, full lips, a strong jaw, and that dangerous pretty boy look that made him stand out right away. His face was rugged, but it still had balance. It looked natural, sharp, and very hard to forget. Then he walked away from acting for boxing, and that changed everything. Years in the ring left him with serious facial damage. Reports tied that damage to broken noses and cheekbone injuries, and Rourke later admitted he needed surgery to repair the harm. He also gave the blunt line people still remember. He said he went to the wrong guy to put his face back together. That is where the shock really comes from. The old Mickey Rourke face had that raw movie star edge. The later face often looks rebuilt instead of aged. His nose shape looks different, his cheeks can look heavier and uneven, and the whole face can seem puffier, tighter, and less balanced than it once was. Instead of that sharp, sexy look people remember, the modern face often reads as battered, altered, and far removed from the man who once looked like one of the coolest stars in Hollywood. Number 17. Linda Evangelista. Linda Evangelista was one of the biggest supermodels of the 1990s, part of the small group of women whose faces ruled magazine covers, runways, and fashion campaigns all over the world. Back then, she had that razor-sharp supermodel beauty people never forgot. Her face looked lean, clean, and perfectly cut. She had strong cheekbones, fierce eyes, smooth skin, and a narrow, elegant shape that made every photo look expensive. She did not just look beautiful, she looked untouchable. What changed her look was not normal aging. It was a cosmetic procedure that went badly wrong. In 2021, Linda said cool sculpting had left her brutally disfigured and permanently deformed. She later explained that she developed paradoxical adipose hyperplasia, a rare side effect where the treated fat grows instead of shrinking. She also said she went through painful corrective surgeries, including liposuction, but the problem did not go away the way she hoped. That is why her transformation hit so hard. The woman once known for a sleek, sculpted supermodel body said she became so changed that she hid from the public and no longer looked like herself. Even years later, that change is still one of the most disturbing beauty treatment stories linked to a major celebrity. Number 16. Janice Dickinson. Janice Dickinson was one of the wildest and most unforgettable faces in fashion. In her prime, she did not look soft or sweet. She looked sharp, hungry, and dangerous. Her cheekbones were high, her jaw looked strong, her eyes had that hard runway stare, and her whole face had a fierce cut-glass shape that made her look built for magazine covers. She was not the kind of beauty you forgot. She looked bold, expensive, and fully in control. That face started changing earlier than most people realize. Janice said she had her first plastic surgery at 32 while dating Sylvester Stallone, after noticing the skin around her jaw starting to sag. She said the mini facelift kept her going. Over the years, she also spoke openly about Botox, a facelift, breast surgery, and a tummy tuck. The reason behind it is pretty clear from her own words. She was trying to hold on to that sharp, youthful supermodel look for as long as she could. Now, the difference is hard to miss. The face that once looked naturally sharp now often looks tighter, heavier, and more worked on. Her skin can look overpulled, her lips look fuller, and the old balance of her features feels less natural than it once did. Number 15. Kim Novak. Kim Novak was one of the great blonde stars of old Hollywood, best known for Vertigo, where her face had that soft, dreamlike beauty people still remember decades later. In her prime, she looked smooth, light, and almost unreal on screen. Her cheeks were gentle, her eyes looked sleepy and magnetic, her lips were balanced and soft, and her whole face had a natural glow that made her seem elegant without looking forced. She did not have a hard or sharp kind of beauty. She had a face that felt delicate, calm, and perfectly put together. That face began to change much later in life, and Kim herself explained why. She said that in 2012 she got fat injections in her cheeks. She later called it the worst thing she could have done. She also said she is a perfectionist and likes to look her best in public, and around that time she felt insecure and nervous before a major appearance. That helps explain why she tried to freshen her face in the first place, even though the result went badly wrong. After that, the difference became impossible to miss. The soft, balanced cheeks that once gave her face its old Hollywood glow started looking too full and too round. Instead of delicate beauty, her face took on a puffier, heavier look. The old shape seemed buried under swollen-looking cheeks that threw off the whole balance of her features. Number 14. Brendan Fraser. Brendan Fraser became a huge movie star in the late 1990s and early 2000s through films like George of the Jungle, The Mummy, and The Mummy Returns. Back then, he had the kind of face and body built for action stardom. He looked tall, strong, and handsome, with thick dark hair, bright eyes, a wide grin, and a square, healthy face that made him feel both tough and likable. He had that clean, adventurous, leading man look people recognized right away. What changed him was not one bad beauty choice, it was years of punishment. Fraser later said the stunt-heavy action work wrecked his body. By the time he got through the Mummy films, he said he was being held together with tape and ice. He ended up needing major medical work, including back surgery, a partial knee replacement, more work on his back, and even vocal cord repair. On top of that came depression, divorce, and a long stretch away from the spotlight, all of which added to the change people saw in him. That is why the later Brendan Fraser looked so different. The old, bright, athletic face gave way to one that looked heavier, puffier, more worn down, and far more tired. His jawline looked softer, his cheeks looked fuller, and the easy, fresh energy that once made him look like the perfect action hero seemed to fade. Number 13. Donatella Versace. Donatella Versace is not just a designer. She is one of the biggest faces in fashion. The woman who took over Versace after her brother Gianni was murdered in 1997 and helped keep the brand famous around the world. Long before people talked about her changing face, they knew her for a bold, flashy look that matched the house she ran. In her earlier years, she had sharp features, a strong nose, heavy eyes, big blonde hair, and a glamorous high-fashion look that was dramatic but still natural enough to feel like a real face, not a built one. Then the look started changing, and that change became part of her public image. Donatella has not publicly laid out a list of cosmetic procedures, but for years the talk around her face has centered on repeated cosmetic work. She has fuller lips, tighter skin, heavier facial shaping, and a face that seemed to keep changing from one era to the next. Even recent coverage of her newer appearance still framed it as another transformation, with fans talking about a new face and a softer reset compared with the harder, more worked-on look people had been seeing for years. Number 12. Carrot Top. Carrot Top became famous in the 1990s as the wild, red-haired comedian with prop jokes, fast energy, and a goofy, loose face that made him look like a walking cartoon. Back then, he was skinny, wiry, and easy to read. His face looked natural and playful. He had softer cheeks, a lighter jaw, bright eyes, and that big mess of curly red hair that made him stand out the second he walked on stage. He looked odd in a funny way, but still very human and familiar. Then his whole appearance started changing. He began lifting hard, building a much bigger body, and his face changed right along with it. For years, people have looked at his later photos and assumed plastic surgery, fillers, or some kind of heavy cosmetic work. Carrot Top has pushed back on that and said he did not remake his face with surgery. He has blamed the change more on intense workouts, aging, makeup, and the harsh look created by stage lighting and his over-the-top image. Whatever the exact mix was, the difference became impossible to ignore. The old skinny comic with the loose, goofy face gave way to a man with huge arms, a much harder body, and a face that often looked tighter, shinier, and far more severe than before. His cheeks looked more raised, his skin looked stretched, and his eyes often seemed harsher under the makeup. Number 11. Val Kilmer. Val Kilmer was one of the most striking leading men of the 1980s and 90s. In movies like Top Gun, The Doors, Tombstone, and Batman Forever, he had that sharp movie star face people remembered right away. He looked strong, cool, and almost too handsome to ignore. His jaw was firm, his eyes were intense, his smile had bite to it, and his whole face had a lean, confident shape that made him feel like a real Hollywood star. What changed him was not vanity. It was illness. Kilmer was diagnosed with throat cancer in 2014 and went through radiation, chemotherapy, and a tracheostomy. He later needed 2 tracheotomies, and the damage from that fight permanently changed both his voice and his appearance. The treatments helped save his life, but they also left his throat and lower face looking very different from the Val Kilmer people had known for decades. In his later years, the difference was heartbreaking. The old, lean face looked heavier and more worn down. His neck and throat area showed the marks of treatment. His jawline looked softer, and the strong, easy expression people remembered had been replaced by something far more fragile and tired. Number 10. Jennifer Grey. Jennifer Grey became famous in the 1980s with movies like Ferris Bueller's Day Off and Dirty Dancing. Back then, her face was not just pretty, it was memorable. She had bright eyes, a lively smile, soft cheeks, and a nose that gave her face its whole character. That nose made her stand out. It gave her look a sense of warmth and charm, and something a little different from the usual polished Hollywood beauty. She looked natural, fresh, and instantly recognizable, and that was a huge part of why people remembered her so easily. Then she changed the one feature that made her face unforgettable. After Dirty Dancing, Grey said people in the industry treated her nose like a problem, and that pressure pushed her into getting a nose job. The first surgery was followed by a second one to fix an issue from the first. Instead of helping, it changed her face so much that she later said she lost her identity and her career overnight. She even said people who knew her did not recognize her anymore. After the surgeries, her nose looked smaller and less personal to her face, and the whole balance of her features changed with it. Number 9. Madonna. Madonna became one of the most famous women on earth by turning herself into a pop icon again and again. From the 1980s on, people knew her face instantly. She had a lean face, strong cheekbones, sharp eyes, and a wide, playful smile that made her look edgy, sexy, and alive. Her look changed with every era, but the core of her face always stayed familiar. No matter the hair, the clothes, or the makeup, she still looked like Madonna. That is why the shock hit so hard when her face started looking very different in later years, especially around the time of the 2023 Grammy Awards. Madonna did not lay out a full list of procedures, but her face had clearly moved far away from the lean, sharp look people knew for decades. She answered the backlash by saying the close-up pictures were distorted and that the reaction was driven by ageism and misogyny. In newer appearances, her face often looks much fuller than before. Her cheeks look built up and lifted, her jaw and skin look very tight, and the whole face can seem swollen, smoothed over, and less expressive than the Madonna people remember. The old face had movement, edge, and natural angles. The newer one often looks more sculpted, puffier, and harder to connect to that earlier image. Number 8. Priscilla Presley. Priscilla Presley first became known as Elvis Presley's wife, and later built her own career as a television actress and businesswoman. Roles in Dallas and the Naked Gun films helped keep her in the public eye for many years. In her younger days, she had a very polished kind of beauty. Her face looked smooth and balanced, with dark hair, large almond-shaped eyes, a slim nose, soft cheeks, and a calm, elegant look that felt classy and expensive without trying too hard. She had the kind of face that looked controlled, graceful, and easy to recognize. What changed her look was not just age. Priscilla herself said she was the victim of botched plastic surgery from an unqualified doctor. Reports tied the damage to silicone injections, which turned what should have been a beauty treatment into one of the most talked-about cosmetic disasters linked to a famous woman. In later appearances, the difference became hard to miss. The face that once looked refined and soft began to look much more fixed. Her skin often looked waxy and too smooth, her cheeks looked heavier, and the whole face seemed tighter and less expressive than before. Instead of the natural elegance people remembered, her features often looked frozen, puffier, and strangely stiff, like the old Priscilla face had been sealed under a harder, more artificial version of itself. Number 7. Sharon Osbourne. Sharon Osbourne first became known as the tough, outspoken force beside Ozzy Osbourne, then built her own television career through shows like The Osbournes and The Talk. For years, her face matched that big personality. She had strong eyes, fuller cheeks, a lively mouth, and the kind of expression that always looked alert, amused, or ready to fire back. Her face had movement. It looked real, balanced, and full of attitude. Then she kept chasing a younger look with more cosmetic work. Sharon later said her October 2021 facelift was the worst thing she had ever done. She said one eye ended up lower than the other. Her mouth looked crooked. And she had to wait for everything to heal before going back to have it corrected. She also said she had pushed it too far, and was done with plastic surgery after that. That damage changed the way people saw her face. The old Sharon looked sharp and animated. The later face often looked over-tightened, uneven, and strangely fixed. The eye area looked off balance, the mouth looked pulled out of shape, and the skin looked stretched instead of naturally firm. The strong features were still there, but the natural balance was gone, replaced by a face that looked pulled too far and pushed well past the point where it still looked like Sharon at her best. Number 6. Joan Van Ark. Joan Van Ark became a huge television star in the late 1970s and 80s through the shows Dallas and Knots Landing. Millions of viewers knew her as Valine Ewing, and her face was one of the most familiar on primetime TV. In those years, her look was soft and easy to recognize. She had smooth skin, bright open eyes, a slim nose, light cheeks, and a gentle smile that gave her a warm, polished, soap star beauty. Her face looked relaxed, natural, and very balanced, which made her instantly familiar to viewers who watched her week after week. As the years went on, that soft look began to change, and public talk around Joan's appearance started to focus on cosmetic work. She has not publicly confirmed a list of procedures, but celebrity coverage and long-running fan discussion have pointed to things like facelifts, fillers, Botox, brow lifts, and laser treatments as the likely reason her face changed so dramatically. In newer photos, the difference is hard to miss. The face that once looked light and gentle now often looks much tighter, especially around the jaw, cheeks, and eyes. Her cheeks appear fuller and more lifted. Her lips look heavier, and the skin can look pulled so tight that her expressions seem more fixed than free. Number 5. Lil Kim. Lil Kim became one of the biggest names in hip-hop in the late 1990s and early 2000s. She was not just famous for the music, she was famous for the whole image. Back then, her face was sharp, small, and instantly recognizable. She had a darker skin tone, a more natural nose, slimmer cheeks, and a fierce, flashy beauty that felt raw and unforgettable. She looked bold without looking rebuilt. Over time, that look began to change. Lil Kim herself admitted years ago that she struggled with low self-esteem, and later coverage of her transformation kept pointing to cosmetic surgery, heavy glam, and a much more altered overall image. Now the difference is jarring. Her skin appears much lighter than in her early years. Her nose looks thinner and more sculpted. Her cheeks often look fuller, her lips look heavier, and the whole structure of her face feels more shaped and polished than before. The old Lil Kim had a hard, sharp, natural edge to her face. The newer version often looks softer in some places, tighter in others, and so changed that many people feel like they are looking at a completely different woman. Number 4. Simon Cowell. Simon Cowell became famous as the brutally honest judge on shows like American Idol, The X Factor, and America's Got Talent. For years, his face was one of the easiest on television to recognize. He had a natural tan, dark hair, a wide grin, a strong jaw, and that smug, sharp look that made him seem cool, mean, and totally sure of himself. His face looked firm and real. It had lines, movement, and character, and that was a big part of why people remembered him. Then he started changing that face. Simon later admitted he had Botox and fillers and said there was a point where he went too far. He said he saw an old photo of himself and did not even recognize it. He also said his son Eric laughed so hard at his altered face that it became a turning point, and he eventually said there was no filler left in his face at all. That change is exactly what shocked people. The old Simon Cowell face looked sharp and alive. The later face often looked puffier, smoother, and much less natural. His cheeks looked fuller, the skin looked over-tightened, and the whole face seemed softer and more swollen than before. Number 3. Meg Ryan. Meg Ryan was the face of romantic comedies in the 1980s and 90s. In movies like When Harry Met Sally, Sleepless in Seattle, and You've Got Mail, she had the kind of beauty that felt easy and natural. Her face was soft, bright, and instantly familiar. She had warm cheeks, lively eyes, a small, playful smile, and that messy blonde hair that made her look charming without trying too hard. She did not have a hard or glamorous movie star face. She had a light, lovable face that felt real, and that is exactly why so many people connected with her. Then that face started looking very different. Meg has never clearly confirmed a list of cosmetic procedures, so the exact changes have stayed in the world of speculation. What is clear is that the old softness people remembered began to fade. Every time she made a rare public appearance, the reaction came back again because her face no longer looked like the Meg Ryan people carried in their heads. She later dismissed the obsession with her appearance as stupid, which makes it clear she had no interest in feeding that noise. In later appearances, her cheeks often looked fuller, her lips looked heavier, and her skin looked tighter and smoother than before. The old face had gentle movement and a natural looseness. The newer one often looked puffier, firmer, and less free, as if the warmth had been pressed out of it. Number 2. Tara Reid. Tara Reid became a huge star in the late 1990s and early 2000s with movies like American Pie, Josie and the Pussycats, and The Big Lebowski. Back then, she had that classic young Hollywood blonde look people instantly recognized. Her face looked fresh, bright, and playful. She had soft cheeks, a light smile, a slim frame, and an easy party girl beauty that felt natural. She looked youthful without looking artificial, and that made her stand out even more. Then she tried to improve a body she already admitted was thin. Tara later said she got liposuction because even though she was skinny, she wanted a six-pack. She also said her breasts had always been uneven, so she decided to get implants and fix them, partly because she was in Hollywood and getting older. Instead, both procedures went wrong. She said the liposuction left her stomach ripply and bulgy, and the breast surgery left her looking badly misshapen. The old Tara Reid look was carefree and naturally sexy. After the surgeries, the image people had of her changed fast. Her body became linked to damage, scars, and uneven results, and that spilled over into the way people saw her whole appearance. Number 1. Lisa Rinna. Lisa Rinna became famous on shows like Days of Our Lives and Melrose Place, then built a second life on reality television, where her face became almost as famous as her personality. In her earlier years, she had a narrow, sharp face, lively eyes, a strong smile, and lips that stood out without swallowing the rest of her features. She looked bold and glamorous, but still balanced. Her face moved easily. It had edge, attitude, and enough natural shape to feel real, not manufactured. Then she kept pushing that look further. Rinna has long been open about doing work, especially to her lips. And in 2024, she admitted a newer filler treatment called Skinvive was not good for her and had to be dissolved the same day. She has also said beauty work was part of her world because she likes trying things and changing things up. That helps explain why she kept going back. She was not trying to disappear, she was trying to hold on to a bold, camera-ready version of herself, and at one point, the experimenting went too far. The old Lisa Rinna face looked sharp and animated. The later face often looked puffier, heavier, and too full through the cheeks and mid-face. Her lips could overpower everything else. The skin looked too smooth, and the whole face started to feel inflated instead of fierce. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.